Let's take a look at the current state of machine identities. Where are we at? The number of machine identities we have is growing astronomically. Some of the stats state that it's 45 times more than what we deal with in a standard employee, and that organizations are, on average, managing about 250,000 machine identities across their organization. I would hazard a guess, if you're dealing with an enterprise organization, that quantity is quite larger. I can tell you I'm working with a large company right now, and we're talking at scales probably 10 times that. Second part of this is a lot of organizations say that they're struggling with the management of certificates. They're managing upwards of 50,000 certificates. A lot of this is being done manually. Again, enterprise organizations, this is probably substantially larger. And lastly, a lot of organizations aren't automating. They're not automating the issuance of these. They're not automating the lifecycle management or behind it. They're not taking the time to understand that there's multiple teams that are managing and issuing certificates. I can tell you, in my experience, I'm seeing development organizations, product management organizations throwing certificates out there in order to get their job done. That's creating a challenge inside of enterprise organizations, even in small businesses, because these certificates aren't being managed. The use of these certificates to establish trust with machines is not being leveraged correctly. And that's causing problems not only from an operational perspective, but also from a security perspective. How are we able to stay on top of identifying and establishing what's that zone of trust? So from a machine identity landscape, let's take a look at this for a second. What does this consist of? Traditionally, your standard infrastructure, my networking gear, my laptops, my mobile devices, anything that we can typically physically attach to a network, we're establishing a machine identity around. Well, it's becoming a lot more complex. With the advent of the cloud, we're now dealing with bringing up managed workloads. We're bringing up new containers. We're bringing up new services. Those are now all starting to take on the form of being a machine identity. If we're working in industries that leverage devices to run the organization, whether I'm looking at point of sale systems, medical devices, sensors on my manufacturing floor, I'm leveraging third-party managed systems to run my HVAC systems, I'm running a smart building. Those will all have machine identities now attached to them. Well, the question then raised to yourself is, where does AI fit in this? What is artificial intelligence? Is it a machine? Is it an entity? So as we start to think about this is getting a lot more complex. This is looking at the cryptography problem across the entire organization. I'm looking at what are my sensors on my manufacturing floor. They're tying back into my ERP. I have my time clocking systems. I'm leveraging robotics to go out and actually do the automation and retrieval of supplies. Manufacturing, this is an incredibly complex problem. I'm leveraging drones to go out there and actually start to do inventory on the floor. I've got hand scanners. Couple on top of that, I'm now managing my user identities. I'm using encryption keys to protect my data. I'm doing code signing. So as organizations start to look at managing machine identities specifically, this problem is huge. And at times it can be overburdening because the state of this complexity is massive. The implications of having something not protected or managed correctly can potentially impact your organization, not only from a regulatory perspective, from a security perspective, but from an operational perspective. If any component of this goes down, my business stops running. And this is the challenge we face as cybersecurity professionals of trying to stay on top of this. We're trying to enable our business to be successful and to operate and to be able to take advantage of all this advanced technology to automate, streamline, and produce the latest products and services to generate revenue, and at the same time meeting the requirements we have to protect the organization. So as we start taking a look at the management of these current state and future state risks, the likelihood of an outage is going up. 81% of the organizations surveyed reported an outage. Loss of service is loss of revenue. Loss of revenue damages your reputation and causes a problem. Threat actors are looking for any advantage they can take in order to get inside your organization. If you're not managing your keys correctly, you're not managing your certificates correctly, they will get in and they will take advantage of it. And the risk of data theft goes through the roof. Throw on top of that, you now have regulations that are coming down. I've got the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act changes from the Federal Trade Commission that are requiring stricter guidance on how I have to protect personal information. I have the SEC regulations now requiring me to report within 72 to 96 hours if I've had a breach. What does a breach constitute? If I'm looking at this from a healthcare perspective, if I have a certificate outage that takes a part of my critical infrastructure offline for delivering care to a patient, exempli gratia, or for example, I have to report to Health and Human Services that I can no longer provide care to a patient. It's a reportable event if a certificate goes down. And lastly, quantum computing is on the horizon. It is coming. While it may not be a relevant threat right now, in the next couple of years, this can become very real. And if we are not thinking about how we're going to manage certificates to be post-quantum ready, we as cybersecurity professionals are going to have a massive problem on our hands staying on top of this. Question to ask yourself, how prepared are you to deal with these? How prepared is your organization to deal with these? This particular incident, it's in the news, all my references are down below. The organization had a system crash. That crash dumped a diagnostic log. Innocent, nothing malicious behind it. The challenge they had here is that that dump log contained the encryption key, unfettered in its raw state. Threat actor was on the inside of this company, found the logs, found the encryption key, took that encryption key, and started issuing their own keys. They have, in essence, gotten inside and taken that one source of trust, that one source of truth, and started to use it to manipulate the inside of this organization's network. And it was a pretty substantial incident. We have an issue here where if you're not managing your encryption keys, how are you going to manage trust? How are you going to manage the identities? Well, let's talk about how do we get involved in this? How do we as cybersecurity professionals need to think about engaging with this? We can't go this alone. We can't solve this alone. This requires us to become part of the solution. We have to think about how do we start to get engaged with the organization in order to start to help them manage these machine identities and these certificates across the entire breadth, not just within IT systems. How are we helping them develop the next level products? How are we helping them develop services? How are we helping them integrate with third parties to run our organization, to be profitable? So what's this look like? You know, as we start collaborating across an organization, as I already mentioned, we're already focused. The people have good intentions here. We are in the business of generating revenue, providing services, supporting an organization. We are standing up new products and services. That innovation is happening very quickly. And it's going to require that partnership, not only at the executive level, but also with your peers, also with the people who are doing the day-to-day development here, to get in front of this, to come up with creative ideas, understand their processes, understand how they are working, and then how can we take our technology, our capabilities, our experiences as cybersecurity professionals and come up with the next thing that'll help them streamline whatever they're doing in order to help run the business, and at the same time meeting those requirements. We have to collaborate at all levels. I think this is critical. We have to understand at the base level what's it take to do the job, what are they doing day to day on their jobs, how do we integrate with it? At the executive level, what are they doing from a strategic perspective? How do we get involved in those conversations? How do we come and be a part of the solution? How do we become part of the strategic vision and the strategic goals? I spend a lot of my time as an advisor talking with executives about how do we become part of the solution and not be part of the problem? How do we set our strategic goals and objectives? Thinking about this programmatically, there is a certain amount of governance and oversight we have to put into place here. And as this particular example starts to show, this is what a cryptography steering committee looks like. And this is how you start to build that governance model out. That top level tier really starts to focus at the executive level. What are we trying to do strategically over the next 3 years? Who do we need to have involved in that conversation? As you can see, this is not just IT and the CIO. This is talking with the VP of products. This is talking with our business leaders and having them at the table to say, this is what we're trying to do. And we as cybersecurity professionals having to think about how do we get in front of this? How do we start to get engaged? What services do we need to provide to get there? What are the investments we need? The service committee is focused on how do we start to deliver this service? How do we start to build it out? Who are the people that are involved here? Typically, this is where we go down one level. This is where we're looking more operationally. The delivery team's a critical part of this. How do we integrate this technology, these services, these programs into things like product development, engineering change boards, into the next generation of solutions. And then lastly, at that bottom level is how do we start to integrate at the day-to-day level? How do we have an advisor on hand who a developer can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. How can we do it? How can we develop this next process? How can we integrate with what you're doing from a cybersecurity side in order to help develop a next generation solution? We are at the table here. We are advisors. We are stakeholders in this because we are part of the solution. And it's really critical to start to understand and keep that in mind as we think about building this out for the future. Again, this is not the compliance approach. This is not the legal approach. This is looking at how do we become a business partner. It's in some aspects a bit of a shift in how we think about running an organization, and it's also a bit of a shift in how we have to interact with the organization. And as you walk away from this, one of the things to think about is how do you get involved? How can we get involved at any level? Now, obviously, as I start talking about being part of strategic steering committees, that's executive level stuff. I've got my CISO involved. I have my senior director of cybersecurity involved. We're talking with CIOs, boards of directors. Great. We as practitioners can get involved in other ways. We can get involved with things like change approval boards. We can get involved with engineering steering committees and sit down. If you're going to build something, how can we help you build it? What are you trying to do? What are some things to think about? And how do we start to leverage the capabilities we have at our disposal in order to help you get ahead? Cloud architecture is another critical part of this. As I talked about, you're building out workloads, you're building out containers, you're building out trusted platforms. Again, having somebody on that board, on that committee, and that team who's an advisor, not only helps us be able to bring the latest solutions to our clients, in this particular case, our clients are our teams, it also helps us understand how do we have to change our solutions, how do we have to change our approach, what other technologies and methodologies and frameworks do we need to think about at an operational level to help the company be successful. I know this may be a little bit of a different shift in how you're typically used to operating, but this is one of the things to think about. How can you engage with those other people? This is about having that conversation. And we as cyber professionals, it's going to be important for us to take a step back and say, what are they trying to do? Put yourself in their situation and think about how can we get integrated in with this. This is all programmatic stuff, this is all process stuff. It's really important, though, to have these foundational processes and components around and in place in order to effectively leverage and maximize the value out of the solutions we get. You know, leveraging solutions for automation is critical. There is a lot of capabilities out there. Certificate lifecycle management, key management, I can look at identity and access management. Automation is foundational on how we're going to get ahead here. Our environments are more complex. We're spinning up cloud instances in 5 minutes. I'm able to put servers online and stand up applications and workloads like that. If I'm not integrated in the process and how they get stood up, it becomes a problem. Doing this manually is a nightmare. You're not going to be successful. Some of the use cases I cited before, talk specifically about the challenges organizations face trying to run this off a spreadsheet. It won't work. The policies and procedures are going to be foundational in this. This is going to talk about what are the standards, how do we do this, how do we engage, how do we integrate with your process. By automating this, we're enabling teams to get things done faster. It's no longer, hey, security, I need a cert for X. You go file a request, they issue it, etc. Being able to leverage automation and orchestration and even some of the direct connectors through ports and protocols or services is going to be critical in this step. The capabilities are out there. So as we're thinking about how we go about this process and how we start to enable the technologies and our capabilities to do this, understanding and having things that are very streamlined, don't require a lot of custom coding, and are pretty turnkey will allow our teams to get things done a lot more quickly. What does this look like? If I'm looking at the center bubble here, that's your certificate lifecycle management solution. That is the core foundation of being able to define what are my policies and procedures, what are my policies for issuing certs, how am I integrating with my issuing authorities, how am I providing reporting on what's going on. If I'm looking on the right-hand side towards the orchestrators, this is the starting point of doing the automation. How am I going to be able to tie into things like managing the cloud? It's one of the big areas where I think organizations struggle because I can take AWS or I can take Azure or Google, and it's got its own CA. It can issue certs. Hey, that's fantastic. How are you managing it? By being able to leverage an orchestrator to tie into that, I can now automate and control the inventory of who's issuing what. Are the certs being issued to my standards. Are those instances, those cloud instances, those servers, those workloads being stood up and managed so I can understand what is that system? How can I identify and trust what it is? Those orchestrators are looked at also tying into our physical assets. How am I registering IoT devices on my laptops? The moment I turn that laptop on, it fires up, it boots its image, it goes out and makes a call. I pull that machine identity down, it gets tied to the device right away. Blink of an eye, automated. And then going down to the bottom is going out and finding out where are these keys and these certificates being used where it's not managed. We have people issuing self-signed certs. We have devices that have self-signed certs. Your orchestrators allow you to go out and actually discover where these devices are, where are they pulling these certificates from in order to establish a machine identity and give you that inventory capability. Moving up top, there's direct protocols we can use. The automatic certificate management enrollment protocol and the simple certificate enrollment protocols, ACME and SCEP, allow me to start going out and registering applications, leveraging SCEP to pull in mobile devices and IoT devices. So I now have that capability to go out and actually pull information in, pull systems in, and manage the enrollment of those devices seamlessly. That makes it a lot easier to come in and bring in new devices, new machines, new identities. Going out to the left side, doing the enrollment services, using things like gateways to go out and connect into cloud services, going out and leveraging things like public key authorities such as Entrust, DigiCert, GeoTrust, you name it, VeriSign, whoever. I can now put controls over that because those certificates are primarily forward-facing, whether that's a forward-facing signing cert I'm using for my SSL or TLS applications, or whether that's a public cert I'm using to establish domain trust for doing things like producing a device that has a signed cert from my company on it. The CA gateways are really focused on managing the cloud. How am I managing my certificate authorities that are in other locations? We're issuing certs from a whole host of systems. We're using these certificates to establish machine identities. The certificate lifecycle management solutions out there allow you to get a better control on that. It allows me to automate my policies. It allows me to automate my reporting. The best time to know you're going to have an outage is before it happens, because the worst time you want to have it happen is after it does happen. Because once it's down, it takes a longer time to figure out what's going on. You're impacting the business every second that goes by. So by being able to provide that proactive reporting, that proactive inventory, and that proactive view on what's coming up, when do we have to rotate these certificate keys, you're going to be able to better manage your machine identities. Google is enacting a change to the issuance of their certificates that's going to require rotation every 90 days. Right now, we're issuing certs that are doing a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, what have you, every 90 days. If you're doing that manually, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a very difficult time staying on top of it. You're going to have a very difficult time understanding where those certificates are, how that's going to impact my machine identity. Is it going to cause things to break? That industry change is coming. Again, leveraging a solution like this in conjunction with the policies and procedures and the program is going to be a pretty key step in order to being able to help your organization, again, innovate as well as maintain its operational capabilities and meet your requirements. Now, as we're focusing on this, you've heard me say this a couple times. Collaboration is the big part of this. We have to integrate with the teams. We have to be a part of this. We have to be at the table in order to be able to leverage these solutions to effectively integrate with the processes. Whether I'm looking at integrating with continuous development life cycles, whether I'm looking at putting this into the part of establishing an immutable environment within the cloud and standing up instances, whether this is the issuance of a new device. We have to understand what those workflows are and how we can take a certificate lifecycle management solution and tie it in. And what's the best way to do that seamlessly? Can I use an API? Can I use a direct protocol? Prioritize this. I think the big part of trying to do anything within certificate lifecycle management is prioritizing what you are going to do going forward. I'm working with a large insurance provider right now that has probably 500,000 certificates under management. And we're helping them go through that process of what are you going to prioritize first. You do it, you have 5 firewalls, you're doing Imperva, you're doing your IIS servers, Active Directory. Where do you want to start? Because trying to do it all at once is going to be really difficult. because of the service interruptions, the amount of workload it's going to take to get this online, the amount of time it's going to take for the process to get integrated, the amount of time to switching things over from an orchestration perspective is going to be pretty challenging. Think about prioritizing it. Understand and identify what those workflows are. Where do we integrate our processes? How do we tie CLM into this? Make it easy. I think that's the big thing to think about here is how can we make it easy for people to do this? We're controlling the certificate standard. We need to understand how can we get that certificate out there quickly? How fast can we inventory it? The inventorying is going to be the big part. We want to find out where those things are. Where are those machine identities being managed with a certificate store that's not under management? If we want to minimize the likelihood of an outage and a security incident, leveraging orchestration is going to help us do this. Organizations are continuing to see an increase in the number of machine identities they're managing. Again, we've talked about cloud, standing up instances, issuances of new devices, BYOD. There's a lot more they're dealing with. Mismanagement can be catastrophic. You're introducing additional risks, not only from an operational perspective, but from a regulatory and security perspective. We have to collaborate with those stakeholders. We have to be a partner in this to talk with the folks who are building these products, who are working this stuff day to day, and become a part of the solution. Get integrated with those workloads. And it's about leveraging automation solutions like certificate lifecycle management and all the capabilities that it brings in there in order to streamline our workflows, streamline our processes, get integrated with what the business is doing to provide them with the visibility and the control and the confidence that they can develop the next generation of products and solutions and services while at the same time minimizing their risks for potential breaches, security incidents. Thank you very much.